Good afternoon, everyone. This is Leon Vainstein from Los Angeles, California. The study of war is actually a specialty, ladies and gentlemen. There is an institute for the study of war, and this institute is headed by an interesting person named General Four Stars. So we have something like an army general, probably comparable to Russian ranks, an army general that is Jack Keane. I have often listened to experts at the level of colonels, brigadier generals, or the political opinions of current military leaders. They can't do without politics. They're too tied to the leadership. But a strategist at the level of, say, the first deputy, the commander of the United States Army, who fought alongside Petraeus, Jack Keane. I listen to him from time to time, but this time he gave a very interesting interview, and I want to share it with you. So, for you to understand the magnitude, so to speak, the scale, the significance, not the magnitude and scale, but the significance of this person. For example, Bush Jr. offered him to become the Minister of Defense, but he refused, saying that he is not a politician. And then the vice president under Bush offered him to be responsible for everything that happens in the Middle East. From a military point of view, Keane refused. He is an advisor to members of Congress and the Senate from both parties. In 2018, Trump offered Keane the position of defense minister as well, but Keane refused. And as a counteroffer, he told Trump that he would be happy to become his unofficial presidential advisor. And he is a member of what is called the United States Defense Council. It's actually called a little differently, but I'm just trying to make it clear in Russian. Well, let's see what interesting things he was telling us.
Yes, well, maybe. Dmitry Medvedev, a senior officer of the Russian security service and obviously a very close ally of Vladimir Putin, put it best. He said that the Istanbul talks, which just took place yesterday, are not about compromise for the sake of peace. In fact, their goal is to ensure a quick victory for Russia. I believe this is precisely Russia's current stance. They are stalling for time, unwilling to make any concessions because they still see the possibility of victory right now. They see a chance and continue moving in that direction.
General Keane, the head of the Institute for the Study of War, expressed a fairly straightforward idea to start with. As long as Russia believes it is winning on the battlefield, it will continue to fight.
So where are we now, and what should the United States do? We all knew this would be difficult, and President Trump understood that when he got involved. Nothing is going to be easy. Even if both sides want to end the war, and one side clearly doesn't because they still believe they can win, it will still be difficult. We need to look at what actually worked. President Trump used Ukraine as leverage because they wanted to get security guarantees. And to some extent, this was understandable from Zelensky's point of view until the ceasefire was concluded.
But today it is clear that Russia will twist and turn again and again. If Zelensky had agreed to negotiations when Trump proposed a peaceful settlement, we would be where we are today at this stage without losing 4 months. And how many 15 to 20,000 killed on the front? What did Trump do to make Zelensky agree to these negotiations?
And the president used this by stopping the provision of intelligence and military aid, and Zelensky dropped these conditions. And this was part of the peace process that the United States used to make someone change their behavior.
It took 4 months. Now this problem is solved, and Russia is in front of us.
We have to do the same with Russia. This is part of the process. It's not something outside the process. And this means that we have to use levers of pressure on it, and we don't know if this will actually work. Let's be honest about this issue, but we know what doesn't work, and just diplomatic talks don't work. Therefore, the lever of pressure, as I see it, is primarily military assistance, as well as providing them with powerful air defense systems and other things they urgently need. Why is that? Because when Putin sees that the United States still supports Ukraine, he understands that he will not be able to achieve victory. The evidence is already right in front of us.
General says things that are understandable even to non-military people. For more than 3 years, fighting against a smaller country that has far fewer missiles, bombs, mines, bullets, and so on, militarized Russia is practically stuck at the same positions as its initial gains, and not a single step further.
Maria, the war has been going on for 39 months, 39 long months. It took us that long to defeat Nazi Germany, and Putin still hasn't succeeded. He hasn't even captured the entire Donbas, which he wanted to take back in 2014. So he won't be able to succeed if the United States continues to provide military assistance. He knows this for sure.
Russia knows that only by completely cutting Ukraine off from the United States a Russian victory is possible. Otherwise, but Putin has just shown Trump his true face, yes, and this face was not pleasant, good-natured, or honest. It just wasn't, no matter how hard you try.
Second point, let's impose crushing sanctions. This is all part of the process. Let's use pressure on Putin just like we pressured Zelensky. We don't know, let's be honest, if this will work, but right now it's definitely worth trying because negotiations aren't bringing any results.
I was just about to say, Lindsey Graham is talking about advancing this bill to impose tough sanctions against Russia. I mean, look, if the free world allows Russia to simply dictate the terms here and declare that all these demands I just listed are supposedly necessary to end this, what would stop Xi Jinping from doing the same in Taiwan or anywhere else he wants? What would stop North Korea from doing the same to Iran, So the free world needs to take a stand here to isolate Russia, right? And you're right. I mean, Lindsey Graham, over the weekend, he went to Kyiv. He went there with Richard Blumenthal. Together, they're pushing a sanctions bill in the Senate that would impose 500% tariffs on countries buying energy from Moscow. Wouldn't that send the right signal to Vladimir Putin?
Of course, I understand that emotional speeches are impressive. But who is this free world she's talking about? Belgium, Singapore, maybe Japan, Canada, Denmark, Holland? No, there is only one power on the planet capable of stopping China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. That power is the United States of America. There is no other. So, by that logic, we have to send our guys, using our own money, which, by the way, we don't have. We borrow it from China to fight against China. So, for our guys to fly all over the world and protect everyone, those who didn't arm themselves, didn't prepare, and didn't even contribute to joint defense like NATO, if these are NATO countries, of course, they are confident nonetheless that we will protect them. Honestly, I just don't get it. Well, okay, so what about General Keane? He'll answer, being a military man. They don't need bread, just a chance to fight.
It will work if it's accompanied by an increase in military aid. Putin pays more attention to what's happening on the battlefield because that's what's really important right now. He wants to achieve a complete military victory, overthrow this regime, and rule this country himself through a puppet. This, plus the essential pressure from sanctions. What should we understand about Putin? When it comes to sanctions, he has always treated them with disdain because he believes he can get around them. I'm by no means downplaying the importance of sanctions. I believe they are extremely important, but even more important is military assistance. And you're absolutely right. I understand. We need to draw a line and take a firm stand. There is no doubt about that. No, President Xi, if we back down, avoid it, and that's exactly what Putin is trying to achieve. He wants to wear down the president so that he gives up and says,
I give up.
That will be a victory for Putin. That will be a victory for Xi. It will also strengthen Ayatollah's resolve to stand up to the United States. And in this, you are absolutely right. And what else will happen as a result of this? Our allies will feel threatened because our opponents will become bolder. Yes, now is exactly the time to use this as part of the peace process. We are all in this peace process and must use the influence of the United States. Use the leverage the United States has.
If I understood correctly, Jack Keane doesn't really believe in 500% sanctions on those who buy oil from Russia, oil and gas from Russia. After all, that's China, India, and also several NATO countries from Europe. It's not clear how to impose sanctions on them, on all of them. The only thing is, let's say, to pass this law and then give the president the right to impose or lift them. But Trump is already doing that. It fluctuates from 130% to 50, 20, 10, and then suddenly back to 145%. Then what's the point of this legislation? Well, maybe I don't understand something. Most likely I don't understand because from my point of view, it sounds idiotic. I've never seen or heard anything that would convince me that this isn't idiocy. But all right, let's see what happens next.
I mean, we all know that China is backing Russia and giving it such support. The president is planning to speak with Xi Jinping this week. I would like to know if this issue will be raised so that President Trump could put pressure on Xi Jinping, so that he, in turn, would put pressure on Vladimir Putin. Does President Trump have room to maneuver to push China to take the right position and stop supporting these adversaries around the world? Would that help?
Well, of course, that would help significantly. China is really Russia's main supporter. They are financing the war by buying their oil at a discounted price. They are providing a huge amount of assistance in the form of military materials. They are not supplying platforms like tanks, armored vehicles, or artillery guns, but they are providing all the components needed for their production, including essential chemicals, rare earth minerals, and everything else. To support an army on the battlefield, you need much more than just weapons and ammunition, and they are providing them with significant assistance. So yes, that's exactly why these sanctions are very important, because secondary sanctions are involved here. As for Iran, I think this is how I see the situation. The Ayatollah allowed his president, who is obviously a bit more moderate than he is himself, to try to engage in negotiations in order to delay a possible attack as much as possible so they could restore their air defense systems, which the Israelis destroyed, primarily the S-300. They are doing this right now. I think the Ayatollah will not allow the United States to dismantle his nuclear program. In other words, we're talking about the ability to independently produce enriched uranium, about the centrifuges at these secret facilities. We would have to be at these facilities and personally observe their destruction. He will not allow this, but what is he willing to do? I think he is willing to allow a strike because he believes that some part of his program, something from it, will survive. And he will still be able to continue developing nuclear weapons, even despite the sanctions. That's his position, and we really need to understand what's at stake for Sotolo. He is playing a very tough game. He is not giving up on the idea of possessing nuclear weapons. Why is he so obsessed with this? That's right, it's pretty obvious. As soon as he gets nuclear weapons, he believes it will ensure the survival of the regime. That you can't. No one will dare to launch a conventional attack against him to overthrow his regime if he has nuclear weapons.
Well, let me translate that into plain language again. Putin's game is to drag things out as long as possible to seize another piece of Ukraine, or maybe to wait until the United States leaves the process and force Ukraine to surrender. Iran's game is also to drag things out as long as possible. Even to endure Israeli bombing, but to hide part of its program, to produce several atomic bombs, and to ensure the inviolability of their regime. That's why this is the main thing they want to achieve. Now, Ukraine's game is to drag it out as long as possible. To wait until the United States gets furious with Putin and starts putting pressure on Russia, in the hope that part of the United States strategy will be to increase arms supplies from its allies. United States trading partners also have their own tactics. They're stalling. They're all waiting. What if something happens to the United States, to Trump, to trade, to war, so they don't have to lower trade tariffs and barriers on American goods coming into their countries? And not to change the world order that's convenient for them, but to change it to something that's convenient for someone else, which might be less comfortable for them. Yes, that's how they perceive it. Honestly, they see it as less comfortable. Then what if, something happens, like over there with Kajin Sredina, like whose donkey will die, whose emperor will die for cheap? Well, in general, in this case. Well, we, in the United States of America in this game, are not going to wait for the sleepy old Western world. Therefore,
according to the report, President Trump demands that the United States' trading partners present their best offers by tomorrow, since the deadline for imposing tariffs on July 8th is already approaching. This is a global economic knockout game, and the White House says it doesn't intend to wait any longer. Lower tariffs, fairer quotas, and real enforcement of rules from digital trade to critically important minerals. These are precisely the demands coming from Washington. And Trump himself is ramping up the pressure, writing in, if other countries are allowed to use tariffs against us, but we are not allowed to respond in kind, then our country doesn't have even the slightest chance of economic survival. According to sources, deals with allies such as India may be within our reach, but with others, especially in Europe and Asia, we could face serious resistance. So I already discussed this with Luba Sanez and said that the list of tariffs he was holding in his hands was not actually a real list. This was included in the negotiations. I was optimistic about the United Kingdom deal. When there was a pause with China, I thought things were going well. When he said that we have problems with the European Union, I said that we have problems with Houston. And for me, that means the problem is much more serious.
the world is used to the status quo. It suits them. What Trump is proposing is a break from the usual, and it even requires sacrifice. Importing their goods into the United States will become more expensive, while importing American goods into their countries will become cheaper. That means America's trading partners will be losing on both fronts. They're dragging their feet. As I said, whose donkey and Padishah is it?
Relations with China appeared to be progressing well, with positive momentum, but now things are slowing down. The Congress will be difficult as it involves negotiations with 27 different countries. Someone will definitely feel left out, but time doesn't wait. I believe that the president is right to raise this issue, to insist on it now, and to use all possible means. Who could have thought that social networks could have such a strong influence on international affairs and economic policy?
Yes, I understand what he is trying to do, but I think that ultimatums can sometimes backfire. You have to be careful. Taylor, if we look at the countries that are the most difficult to negotiate with, I would probably say that China and the European Union top that list. So you see a part of this?
This is very interesting, guys. We've talked a lot about who needs whom more. China needs the United States more. They'll give in first, they'll call first, they'll blink first in this game of nerves. Last night, data on China's private sector manufacturing came out, and it turns out they've moved from a growth zone to a contraction zone. The index of new export orders in China is dropping to its lowest level since July 2023. Employment is falling, prices stay low as demand and supply weaken. Here is another quote from Chinese manufacturers. Unfavorable factors affecting China's economic development still prevail. The uncertainty of the external trade environment has increased, and the pressure on the economy has intensified compared to recent periods.
What does all this mean? New buildings, but the construction projects are on hold, orders are decreasing, unemployment is rising, and China is having problems. By the way, what's going on with the United States as a result of everything that's been happening here since around April 2nd?
To our surprise, in the first quarter, the United States began construction of new manufacturing facilities. My daily chart shows that the construction of manufacturing facilities in the United States is being tracked at a level that's 250% higher compared to 2019. So again, this is just one note, one indicator. But this morning, I'm looking at this and thinking, wow, everything looks pretty negative for China, and yet I'm only finding positive news. There is another volatile component of gross domestic product that we don't talk about because it's too variable, but it shows very high growth in the second quarter for the United States. So again, in this game of endurance, who needs whom more?
Maybe it's still early, but so far the United States isn't experiencing difficulties from reduced trade with China, while China is feeling it. Maybe the Chinese are so hardened that this won't affect the Chinese Communist Party and its power in any way. But for now, China has a greater need to restore relations with the United States, more than the other way around. I mean, more than the United States needs to restore relations with China. Besides, when a new order comes, if we restructure things, then what we want is for exports to increase, maybe by a lot. So what can Trump do to speed up this process?
I think he's doing fine. I'm a bit more positive about ultimatum than you are. When I give ultimatums to my kids, it backfires on me. Usually that's not very good, right? I can confirm that Donald Trump handles ultimatums better than I do. And I think he goes to these countries and says, let's move in a Trump way. You now live in the Trump era, having pondered the situation and assessed the current political climate. Let's make a deal. Give me your best offer and we'll tell you if it's good enough. I like it. If you're right, now is the time. Kitai always lies about their numbers, but if they admit production is declining, the situation must be dire. In the United States, we keep hearing impressive statistics about unemployment, inflation, and manufacturing, suggesting that everything is going well. Now is a good time for the United States to take advantage of this and achieve results. So I like what he's doing in this regard.
Let's move from pure economics to political economy. I'll show you now some excerpts from the dialogue between Bill O'Reilly and Victor Davis Henson. I've shown them to you several times already, and, well, they're both very sharp. I would put it this way.
If you compare the Cold and many people think we are in a new Cold War, similar to the one with the Soviet Union. In 50 years, China occupies a completely different place in relations with the United States. We didn't have Soviet students here. We didn't have trade agreements. It was the Cold War. But I would like to see more normalization of what, in my view, is a kind of deviation. We have 300,000 students. At Stanford, we just had a series of articles come out revealing that there was an organized student spy group. About 4 years ago, we had a member of the People's Liberation Army in our department as a visiting neuroscientist. The Confucius Institute was closed. The United States Department of Education under Trump during his first term and under the leadership of DeVos fined Stanford for failing to report multiple donations. So I think, Bill, I want to say that the point of view of George W. Bush, as well as Bill Clinton and George L. Bush, and to a lesser extent, but to a greater extent, Obama, the idea was that the more interaction you have with China. They were supposed to be influenced by American culture, tolerance, and start to imitate us. But that didn't happen. That's not happening. No, that's not happening. That's not happening. So I think Trump's position was that we let them feel our flexibility or softness, and our generosity was met with exploitation, not reciprocity. I think that right now we are in a situation where if you look at China, they are building 3 to 4 nuclear warheads a month, and they plan to bring their number to about 1,205 years to about 1,205 years.
Interestingly, several presidents in a row, I'm not sure if Obama is among them, by the way, they believe that if a Muslim or Chinese communists or maybe Sudanese bandits saw how good it is to live in a democracy, they would immediately abandon their Islam or communism, or simply the desire to take by force something that others have, and they would rush to build democracy. Right away, yes. Such a democratic republic or a republican democracy, well, like the United States of America. This idea has always stunned me. I remember Bush Jr. said about Iraq that once they tasted the fruits of democracy, they would never go back to an Islamic state. I've never heard anything more astonishing from any president, not even from Biden. Even Biden never said anything more astonishing. He said many stupid things, but surprisingly, that was the most remarkable. Before that. And I treated the younger and the older well. I just didn't understand what he was doing. Well, it doesn't matter. These are always some kind of statements, naive ones, and they really discouraged me. Once again about Obama. I don't think he was in that cohort because it seems to me that he is neither about the United States of America nor about democracy nor about the free market. It appears to me that he didn't really like them.
I think what I want to say is that because of World War II, and also because we have a large Chinese diaspora here, there was a natural sympathy for closer relations. And this wasn't the Cold War, Trump-Eisenhower, the Cold War. Americans really believed that there was an opportunity to establish relations with China and to offer them some relaxation, the kind we didn't give to other countries we dealt with.
It worked for a while, but then Xi came, and his personal legacy, as you know, is closely tied to Taiwan. Do you believe it? I said that I came up with this partnership for the sake of prosperity and peace. And the reason I did it is that China needs to feed 11.5 billion people. They are experiencing difficulties. Their economy needs the United States. This is our main leverage over them, and I believe they are ready to make a deal. Do you believe that?
In my experience, the Chinese are very practical and difficult to negotiate with in business dealings. Until the very last second, they won't show even a centimeter or a step back, never giving the impression that they're willing to retreat. Yes, but suddenly, at the very moment, they've decided, boom, a handshake. That's been my experience. Then comes the precision, the responsibility of the Chinese partners. They can easily break all the rules of international organizations like the United Nations, ESCO, the World Health Organization, and others. But a direct contract for delivery, for financing, for the quality of goods. I've never had that happen, nor have the people I know. The question is, why aren't international agreements important to them, but business contracts are? I don't know. Maybe it's something in their psychology. I don't know, in aesthetics, ethics, or something else.
I think they're ready to make a deal in the economic sphere because they're suffering. It's a kind of historical phenomenon. The more opportunities they have for social advancement, the less satisfaction there is among the population. It's simply a human trait, human nature. They become even more ambitious in their pursuit of a better life. And it's very difficult to meet the expectations of the growing Chinese middle class because they don't spend as much as they should on domestic well-being.
No, everything goes to military purposes. Yes, everything is for military goals. There are only Spartans there. But here's what I observed after checking a few times. I said, you won't get anywhere with Trump because everything revolved around Trump. You know, you gave a very logical and good historical analysis. But they're not interested in that. They're interested in Trump. All right. And I said, the first thing you need to do is put an end to fentanyl. All right, you need to deal with this. They say they're dealing with it, but mention precursors. I said, I don't want to hear about precursors. Do you recall that all of this was being translated? You know, they had these little headphones because half the room spoke English and half didn't. But with the simultaneous translation, I said, I don't want to hear about precursors. You don't need fentanyl. You don't need any of this at all. Put an end to it. Give this to President Trump. That's where you should start. You don't need to get in bed with Putin. And I warned them about Putin. I said, you can try to be his friend, but he will turn against you like a snake. You don't need to flirt with these people. The United States can meet your energy needs in a much safer way. They couldn't answer any of these questions, Professor, not one. And I just put everything in order. I said you were going to cooperate with bad guys, with real evil, and that's exactly the label you'll get. Why do you need this? You don't need it. It won't help you. And that was the essence of all 90 minutes.
Last time I said that the leadership of China asked Bill O'Reilly to hold a session. He flew to China and they found out about it. He naturally submitted an application to the embassy and right away they called him and said, Our leadership would very much like to hold such a Q&A evening with you. Would you be willing to answer some questions? So he said with pleasure, of course, and naturally informed our State Department. At the session, there were 14, as he said, high-ranking company executives present, including department heads, and in addition, as he mentioned, a few even more influential Chinese guys. They watched this seminar online, and when they had questions, they asked them through the people present. At the seminar, O'Reilly said that he wasn't going to argue with anyone, and that he was presenting his own absolutely personal point of view, not an official government perspective. And he stated his own. As he said, "Mon pardon, I don't believe in the idea of a China-United States union without watchdogs." Again, his expression was something like, without Iran, without North Korea, and, to put it mildly, without Russia or the United States, as he said. Well, I'm almost sure that Gazdepp just discussed this matter with him. The United States will supply you with energy resources instead of Iran and partially instead of Russia, but you don't have to do anything. From the point of view of protecting someone, where else would we be protecting them anyway? Yes, or your territories. Well, we absolutely don't need your territories. We don't even share a single border with you. We don't have any disagreements in the border areas. You don't go there, we won't go here. But if we stop constantly trying to outmaneuver each other, the world will live more peacefully and better. After arriving, O'Reilly called the White House, was connected to Trump, and reported to the president with details that, as he said, he could not disclose publicly.
To compromise with your own ideology, because there is a whole group of people around them who do not respond to the same stimuli as Western democracies or dictatorships.
I'll tell you why. There wasn't much love for Putin or Iran in that room. The Chinese don't care about or have interest in Ukraine. All right, but there wasn't much sympathy there.
There was no love for Putin in my audience, he said. But they all knew that the bosses were listening. That means they behaved in a way that their bosses would approve of. So O'Reilly and Kenson talked about universities, about the Ivy League, which last time I called something else the Bay Leaf League.
They know this violates the Constitution. They also know that the Chinese government, and especially Gooder, allocated them a total of $50 billion. And this really influenced our foreign policy, because now there's an entire generation of people coming out of these master's programs who attended classes taught by professors, funded by these two governments. And I could go on, but anti-Semitism is very widespread there. At Stanford, we had a 900-page report prepared by liberal professors. This is one of the most accusatory documents I've ever seen. So they don't want to get into conflict with Trump because they have too many vulnerabilities, too much guilt. They take 110% of the fees from foreign students, and foreigners make up a third of all students.
It's all about the money. But even at Harvard, they're not ready to give up their ideology. They admit that 80% of the new employees are progressives. Maybe that's true. There are 5 conservative professors. They don't even admit that it's wrong. So basically, I hope Trump wins.
Does Trump have all the trump cards? Yes, he does. A recent Gallup poll showed that 65% of the population trusts higher education.
But this drives the media crazy. Oh, they're going downhill.
Now it's only 30%, and Trump is considering the possibility of taxing endowment income. Oh yes, he's going to go after everything. Yes, they'll have to negotiate with him.
I hope so.
I think he'll win this.
And I think that if Xi and Trump end up in the same building, they'll work something out too.
What we've found out is that the Chinese leadership doesn't like Putin, that they absolutely don't care about Ukraine or what's happening there, that China wants to reach an agreement with the United States on close cooperation, but at the same time they're producing nuclear warheads in huge quantities. Well, and now for dessert.
Why is Donald Trump doing this? He's leading a counter-revolution. In his first term, he said, I will deal with the symptoms. Foreign policy, the border, crime, energy. He realized it was nearly impossible to change things. There were anonymous sources. There was James Comey. There were people in the Department of Justice. And then his years in exile began. And he said, we need to figure out why these people have such power when they have problems. Nobody wants an 80-20 ratio, 70-30. Nobody wants open borders. Nobody wants a ban on fracking. Nobody wants a new Green Deal. Nobody wants transgender people participating in women's sports. And he made a convincing argument that they have control over institutions, mass culture, the media, universities, schools from 1st to 12th grade, and so on. And he just said, in many ways, the federal government allocates money to far-left people under the guise of impartiality, but in reality, that's not the case. So I'm not going to get into a conflict, actually. I'm just not going to fund National Public Radio or Public Broadcasting Service. Americans are confused because they've let in between 10 and 12 million illegal immigrants, and there have been a lot of lawsuits about this. Make Mayorkas, who has been impeached, follow the law? Entering the United States without permission is illegal.
And now listen carefully to the explanation of what judges, who were once reporters, editors, and others, are doing as they become tools for building fascism in the United States. Here's what the court says. Here.
What the court says. A message to American voters. From our point of view, it was illegal that all of you, 12 million, broke the law and entered the country. It was legal to break the law, but now it's illegal to obey the law, to make you comply with the law. Go back home and try again, but this time legally. And go back home and try it again legally.
I think Kenson summed up the situation perfectly, the one created by the Democrats in the United States. These are his words, are telling us it was legal to break United States border laws and bring millions of migrants here. But it's illegal to act within the law to send home those who illegally crossed our border. Well, you couldn't have said it better. On that note, on the clear definition of what the Democrats are doing, that's actually where we'll wrap up. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the nice comments. I read them. I don't always have the chance to reply to everyone, but I do read them. By the way, for those who think that I delete something, I want to let you know that, yes, I do delete things. I delete in only 2 cases. When I see links to external articles or videos, I delete them immediately. And the second case is rude remarks about the participants in the discussion. Me, please, well, if possible, not too much, but actually it can be very much. You can swear, you can actually say anything you want. First of all, as they say here in America, I am a public figure. So it's up to you, yes. But please don't touch the participants in the discussion who are also corresponding with you. I absolutely can't stand this kind of rudeness. Moreover, I remember or even write down who does it, and the first time I just make a note, that is, I write something and delete it, yes. But the second time I just cross them out completely. To hell with it, I can't stand rude old ladies. You know, some people don't like blondes and others don't like rude people. Anything can happen. Who hasn't subscribed to the channel yet? The Roadmap to Freedom, please subscribe there. Tons of new, interesting material. That's all, ladies and gentlemen, and until next time.